Bonelab Patch 5 is confirmed to be coming out in under a month, and there's a lot of information to go over as far as changes go, with a lot of the info dating way back to before Patch 4 even dropped. So let's not waste any more time. Here's everything we know so far. Oh, and by the way, the background footage is an early build of Bonelab Fusion on Patch 4. First and foremost, a little release date prediction. We were told that updates would come out within 6 weeks of each other, and Patch 4 dropped on the 6th of June. Assuming the 6-week sentiment still holds true, the latest we can expect an update is July 18th. Some of you may not understand how an update is even able to drop this soon when Patch 4 took like 4 million years, but that's because one of the big things Patch 4 did internally was make updates better to develop for. Because of this, we can expect to see updates release a lot more rapidly, and I genuinely believe SLZ will keep this 6-week sentiment true up until the end of Bonelab's lifespan. With that out of the way though, let's get on to some of the actual changes. The piss poor armor K of Patch 4 with the chicken winging is seemingly getting fixed. Brandon replied to a tweet by Adam Dev asking about features of Patch 5, and Brandon replied with, "One thing is that the elbow solve now factors in the wrist's range of motion in addition to the shoulder's ROM. I read that like I knew exactly what the fuck he was talking about, but in reality I really didn't completely understand what's being said here, but it does sound like the RMK of Patch 4 should be fixed now. So punching enemies in Patch 5 should feel a whole lot better and potentially less weak, although that one isn't a guarantee as it's the visual IK changing and may not affect gameplay in any way, though I suspect it will. This update will not include the inside-out body tracking of the Quest 3 that was teased before Patch 4's launch. This is due to 3 main reasons Brandon has listed. Number 1, Bonelab needs to move to Unity version 2022, which is something that's gonna happen in Patch 7. 2, OpenXR needs to be updated, which again can only happen in Unity version 2022. And finally, number 3, it needs to be polished up before release. Now, this does not mean that, oh, inside-out body tracking is coming in Patch 7. This is not the case. Patch 7 is simply the earliest it could potentially happen, although Brandon seems to be heavily leaning towards it happening a good bit later. So I wouldn't hold out any hope for a Patch 7 drop, but I might hold out a slight glimmer of hope for a Patch 8 drop, and realistically, I'm personally expecting inside-out body tracking to release in Patch 9. Now onto the big one. The Bonelab player is moving to the SDK. This could potentially mean a whole lot of things, but let's first start with the more realistic ones. So first and foremost, I'm expecting that this change means grips are finally coming to the SDK. This is huge because some simple mods that use grips should no longer need to be updated every patch. While on the surface, mods that are just objects with grips on them doesn't seem that important, if you think about the bigger picture, like custom campaigns with custom props, it starts to make more sense as to why this is a lot more important. Instead of modders having to fix every object with a grip on it when the SDK updates, modders will now be able to do it once and never again. Assuming grips do actually get added to the SDK, which seems to be the case based on what Brandon said before, when he said grips can't move until the rig manager does. Well, the rig manager is moving now, so hopefully grips are coming with it. The button to make spawnables was blocked off in the Patch 4 SDK, so I'm also hoping that button comes back in Patch 5. A little silly issue from the Patch 4 SDK, that is hopefully all better now. Next, now that the player rig is being moved to Marrow, I can't help but think big. Like, what if the Bonelab player rig is finally being made available for game devs? Now, there's not many mentions of it in this case, but there's enough reasons that I think it's definitely something worth mentioning and looking into right now. Before Bonelab's launch, we were hearing about how Marrow could potentially be used for other games by different people and maybe even licensed out. Of course, we haven't seen this at all yet, but with the rig going to Marrow, maybe we could. Brandon replied to a tweet that said they came for the locomotion but stayed for the physics, and his reply stated that a pattern has certainly emerged for successful VR titles. Unfortunately, it's an incredibly difficult, time-intensive, and expensive one to follow. We'll do our best to alleviate it. It is very unclear how Brandon and the SLZ team plans on alleviating such a big issue, but I can't imagine them doing anything more helpful than making their years of mastering the player rig available for other developers to take advantage of. This could potentially make it so even the most simple of VR games can still, at the very least, feel great and give VR game developers a way of being able to focus on the games themselves instead of dedicating a large portion of development time and effort towards interaction. Imagine if you could boot up any new VR game and not have to worry about the dated ways of floating hands and no physical interaction with the world, and instead the games just felt like an almost unified laws of physics where everything reacts how you'd expect it to. It could seriously change the future of VR games in a major way. As absolutely exciting and thrilling as that may sound, let's manage our expectations a bit and remember that none of this is confirmed and could very well never happen. But with the rig moving to Marrow, we are at the very least one step closer to that potential reality. Let's now move back to things more in the scope of Bonelab itself. With patch 4 being the start of SLZ finally fulfilling their promises and living up to the hype of Bonelab's launch, we have a second shot at seeing if they can pull it all off. Patch 4 and the now upcoming patch 5 are great signs of them holding true to what they said they would do. Yeah, almost 2 years later, but better late than never. Personally, I really do have a lot of faith in SLZ, especially now, because while Bonelab was a big mess at launch, it's the only slip-up they've ever had, and are now righting that wrong. They are still the same team that made the horrifying World of Duck season, and the same team that made the wonderful experience of Boneworks. Patch 5 isn't as big as Patch 4, as Patch 4 was basically Bonelab remastered, but Patch 5 is more like the first update for this Bonelab remaster. It's like we're back at launch, this time with the game actually ready to receive those updates we were promised. So overall, a good deal of exciting stuff coming in patch 5, nothing too crazy, but still a good update to be excited for, and potentially something really crazy. I'm glad we're finally seeing Bonelab get these awesome SDK updates, and hopefully SLZ will continue this really good streak as time goes on. And again, I really think they will now that they have all their core systems in place. The final bit of info we have is that SLZ is taking in feedback from patch 4 to implement into patch 5, which hopefully means we can expect some of the more requested features to be prioritized and released sooner rather than later. That's about all I have for this video. If you enjoyed, please check out my latest one where I yap a bit about some other Bonelab news, most notably the potential for fusion on Quest in patch 4. There's actually a lot of hope for it now. It's still not guaranteed, but a lot more hope than there was previously. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you next time.
And I crumble completely when you cry.